with a large crowd gathering, placing their bets, shouting and screaming. Abraham Lincoln and Jack Armstrong were in the midst of a heating wrestling match to determine who was the stronger man of New Salem, Illinois. It seemed that both men were struggling to get advantage on one another. The stakes were high, with Lincoln's new reputation and Armstrong's current reputation of the best fighter on the line. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Whiskey and History. I am your host, Zach Holmeyer. I'm very excited for you everyone to tune in on this wonderful Friday night for the first episode. And of course, I'm drinking one of my favorite whiskeys, Crown Royal. This time I'm actually going to drink a flavor that's not one of my favorites of Crown Royal, and that is salt and caramel. I got it for Christmas from somebody, so I was like, you know what, let's give it a try, and so far, so good. For those of you who do not know, Crown Royal is my favorite whiskey, and over this podcast series, you guys will hear me talking about how much I love Crown and how much more Crown I'm going to drink, and I hope you guys sit down, pour yourself a nice ice-cold whiskey on the rocks, just how I like it, and take it easy, and remember, don't drink and drive. That is not the purpose of this. But for today's episode, let's dive right in. We're going to talk about one of the lesser unknown stories about our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. Like I said before, or like I have said in the trailer for the podcast, we are talking about local history from Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, and Abraham Lincoln moved to Sangamon County when he was a young man, and he ended up in the small town of New Salem. With a lesser known story about him, he actually had a reputation of being a wrestler. I found this out through reading two books, one in college with the Lincoln scholar, Michael Burlingame. I took a class with him, one of my favorite professors, actually the world-renowned Lincoln scholar. But anyway, I read that early on in one of his books, and then I got another book for Christmas from for my birthday from one of my aunts about Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, written by Brian Kilmeade. And I used both those books to kind of reference the story a little bit, but it's actually an interesting one. I thought it was kind of funny and pretty neat that our president and local hero here, Abraham Lincoln, actually was wrestling people when he first came to the region, which I found kind of shocking and funny and ironic that our 16th president, or before he was our 16th president, had a interesting reputation. Something that is, like I said, not as known. Lincoln, known as this great emancipator, actually was wrestling around in the dirt trying to gain his reputation. So let's dive into the story here, and I hope you guys enjoy. Long before the American Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was a young man out on his own, starting to make a name for himself. When Abraham Lincoln first entered New Salem during the summer of 1831, he was on a mission to finally settle on his own. The frontier town of New Salem was growing with a population of more than 100 women, men, and children. He got a job as a store clerk for Denton Oft, dispensing coffee, tea, gunpowder, liquor, tobacco, and other commodities. Very quickly, Lincoln became a popular store clerk throughout the town of New Salem. People were amazed by the stature that Lincoln posed when you first saw him, with his tall, awkward, and strong demeanor. Working as a store clerk is where Lincoln earned one of his first famous nicknames, Honest Abe. He earned this name by treating customers with a good heart. One day, a woman accidentally overpaid for a dress at the store, and later that evening, Lincoln showed up at her house, giving back the correct amount of change owed to her. Another time, Lincoln accidentally sold the woman the wrong amount of tea and then later showed up to her home with the extra amount of tea that was owed to her. And this just shows that he was willing to go out of his way for these people, and especially during the time when you have to look, and figure that women were easily taken advantage of. And it did not take long for the young Lincoln to become popular within his community, and especially with the ladies, which I kind of find funny. Since Lincoln's reputation was growing fast throughout the town, the owner of the store, Denton Oft, decided to play a bet on his popular store clerk, Lincoln. Oft bet a rival store clerk, Bill Clay, $5 that his tall, lanky store clerk could out-wrestle any challenger in the town. Billy Clay knew just the man to ask to face Lincoln in the bet, and his name was Jack Armstrong. Jack Armstrong was a leader of a local gang formed around New Salem, and he was basically looked at as the pride of the settlement. That even earned him the nickname Salem's Glory. Armstrong was a shorter man, but he was strong as an ox, square built, and was a seasoned fighter, winning multiple bets throughout Sangamon County. Once Lincoln heard the news of him being wavered in a wrestling match for a man he was not thrilled about. He was by nature a man of peace and not a fighter, but Lincoln knew if he backed out of this fight, it would ruin his new reputation that was growing throughout the community. During this time period, you have to remember, your reputation meant everything to an individual, and Lincoln knew that this would ruin him. In wrestling matches back then as well, you have to remember, they are far different from the ones that we're used to seeing on television or in movies or WWE wrestling. The match would start with the opponent's kind of in an Indian hug position, and the goal was to just throw your opponent to the ground. And that was basically it. There was no, jumping, smashing chairs, diving on the person, pinning them to the ground. That was all added later, basically, I would say, for show. And basically, you just kind of wrestle around and see if you could throw your opponent on the ground. And once that opponent was thrown into the dirt, then you were the decisive winner of this wrestling match. The day of the match finally comes, with a big crowd gathering outside of Oft's store. The crowd was screaming and shouting. Everyone was placing their bets on who would be the victor. Would it be the Honest Abe or Salem's Glory prove once again he was the best fighter in the county? The two men locked into position, and the match was off. It seemed that both men were struggling to get a clear advantage over the opponent. Even though Armstrong was exponentially stronger and a great wrestler, he found it difficult to handle Lincoln's great reach and height. As the match wore on, it seemed that Lincoln was going to be able to throw Armstrong into the dirt. The store clerk, Bill Clay, shouted to his man, "Throw him away, Jack," breaking the rules of wrestling. Armstrong broke his hold and dove at Lincoln's legs. Lincoln was quick to react with a maneuver of his own and was able to grab Armstrong by the throat, lift him up into the air. And the crowd was upset that Armstrong committed an obvious foul and wanted to take things further. Both sides were ready for an all-out brawl, but Lincoln quickly diffused the situation. Even though there was not a clear winner, Lincoln gained the much-needed respect and support from the entire community of New Salem that day. He and Armstrong would be good friends throughout his lifetime. When Lincoln went on to run for his political career, he had the entire support from Jack Armstrong's gang and in New Salem. Basically, Armstrong would go around promoting Lincoln's political career, telling people to vote for him, which is kind of ironic. You see this, how he cheated him in a wrestling match and later becomes a huge fan. Lincoln was seen as the newcomer of New Salem, but after this infamous wrestling match, he was now the well-respected and praised for his fairness. And those traits would only follow Lincoln to the days of becoming the 16th president of the United States. I hope you guys enjoyed that little short story of Abraham Lincoln as a wrestler. I find it kind of neat because, like I say in the episode, that, Lincoln earns a good reputation throughout New Salem, gains the respect of the entire community, gains the respect of former rivals, and even though he was basically looked like he was going to win this wrestling match, it ended up being a draw because of Armstrong cheating the rules. But that didn't deter Lincoln. He was just a man of great respect, and you see this later in his life. And I also find it kind of funny that my goal, even in this podcast, is not to talk about Lincoln that much because, like I say, he lived in New Salem, then moved to Springfield, which is my hometown, became a lawyer here, and then ended up moving to Washington and becoming the 16th president. And basically in Springfield, we talk a lot about Lincoln. Everywhere you look, there's Lincoln. We have Lincoln's tomb where he's buried here, the famous Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. And like I always say, there's more to history to Springfield, Illinois, and the surrounding community besides Lincoln. And but I find interesting is I thought this was kind of a fun little story, something that's usually not focused on. So, you know what? I can bend the rules a little bit. It's my show. So, like I said earlier, what was used in today's research for the episode was Abraham Lincoln, A Life, Volume 1 by Michael Burlingame, one of my college professors, and the Brian Kilmeade book, The President and the Freedom Fighter, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, and Their Battle to Save America's Soul. I highly recommend that you read both these books, especially Burlingame's Volume 1 and 2. Very large. They cover President Lincoln's entire life. And once again, guys, I hope everyone enjoyed this first episode. Many more to come. All kinds of fun, interesting episodes I'm looking forward to sharing with everyone. And if you like this, make sure to leave a review, share the podcast on social media or with your friends. And if you're interested in seeing some images from today's episode, then go check out my Instagram page in the description below and also my Twitter account. Thanks, guys, for listening, and I hope you guys tune in for some more episodes. Thanks.